Hello, good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Azim, would you like to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Azim.
Hello.
The floor is yours. We are waiting
Hello.
for you.
Hello. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. We can hear you, Azim. Go ahead.
The 2020 International Joint Scientific and Practical Video Conference, our event, is online development and started. Before the video conference, ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to begin, please get ready and finish it. I have a few housekeeping rules before we begin today's program. First, I would like to seek your cooperation in completing this video conference. Kindly ensure your internet connection is stable and switch off or put your mobile phone on silent for the smooth running of today's program. Thank you for your kind attention and cooperation. Beginning of the video conference, dear ladies and gentlemen, good evening to our fellow guests from Malaysia, and a good morning to all guests from Uzbekistan. It is my pleasure to be an MC for this program. I am Azim Ibadat, and on behalf of this committee, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining the 2020 International Joint Scientific and Practical Video Conference, the first online international event jointly organized by Turkish State Pedagogical Institute of Science and Britain, Uzbekistan, and the Sultan University, Malaysia. Now, I give the floor to begin this program. I will deliver the opening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be at 2020 International Scientific and Practical Video Conference, and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Shakar Sabran, the Vice Chancellor of Sultan University, Malaysia, and the University of Wyoming for supporting this video conference. To Dr. Jannazah Khatibullah. I would like to thank to our Rector of Turkish Pedagogical Institute of Science and Britain, Uzbekistan, and the Excellency of Professor Mr. Offerjan. Now I give the floor to Nasir Zuhriddin, Acting Director at the Republican Research Center for Development and Innovation in Teaching Foreign Language, MA in Linguistics. Fulbright Award 2018-2019. Please, Nasir Zuhriddin, your floor. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Yes. Christiani Beckett Holland University, lecturer. Mr. Hello. Okay. Sorry for technical. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are in the first agenda. I would like to invite panel speakers, Associate Professor Dr. Majatun Binti Muhammad from Sultan Education University. Prof, please will you start your topic?
All right. Thank you, Chairperson, Dr. Aziz. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Those of you in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent, in Malaysia. And of course, good morning to Dr. Dinoza. And good afternoon to everyone in Malaysia. I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to be all of you here today. I'm indeed humbled to be here. I have been teaching as a teacher educator since 2001, and I've taught subjects ranging from curriculum and syllabus design to second language acquisition to social linguistics in the ASL context. So my sharing today will be based on my observations as a teacher educator, my experience, as well as based on my research. The title of my present hello. Can I continue? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the title of my presentation is the can I see my PowerPoint presentation, please?
Dr. Maiza, is it possible for you to share your own screen since you are
I can't. It's not activated.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
The sharing button is not activated.
Dr. Maiza, can you see the button now? The sharing button.
No, I can't.
Okay, hold on. Dr. Maiza, it's still loading. We'll be in a minute. Hold on, everybody.
Okay, now I can see. All right, thank you, Izzat. So I can continue, yeah? Can you hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes.
Clear.
All right, thank you. So the title of my presentation is The Changing Culture of Foreign Language Classrooms. Now, when I first look at the theme of the conference and I look at culture, and I was thinking, how do we define culture? Of course, traditionally, when we talk about culture, we talk about one's nationality, we talk about one's location, ethnicity, and to a certain extent, their background, social background, their education background. So it can be quite straightforward. You look at a person, and you kind of you can guess what is the culture that they may uphold. But is that the case now? Is culture as straightforward as it used to be? Because I believe with the current situation of the world, culture can be very complex now. All right? Is that next? Is that next? Okay. Why is culture a very complex matter now? Because we live in a world without boundaries, where we have a lot of access to learn about other people's culture. We have a lot of access to interact and communicate with people. Not only, so interaction and communication are no longer restricted to people with whom we meet physically. Look at what's happening to us now at this very moment. 20 years ago, this may not be possible. If I were to present a paper in a conference in Uzbekistan, I have to go to Uzbekistan. Or if I want to interact with someone with Dr. Dinoza, for example, I have to go to the States, or Dr. Dinoza has to come to Malaysia and we get to interact. But that is not the case anymore. And so that's what makes, I think, culture a very complex matter now. Next, is that? Okay, and that's also the reality of our students. Our students are engaged with the foreign language and culture outside the classrooms, especially in the virtual world. So they do not have to be in our foreign language classrooms to be engaged using the language. So in the past year, our classroom may be the only place where they can use the language, where they can interact using the foreign language that they are learning. But that's not the case anymore. Long before they join our class, they may have already encountered this engagement where they need to use the foreign language. They have already been exposed to various cultures of the world, and they don't need us to a certain extent anymore for that kind of exposure. And this interaction, this engagement is not limited to communicating or interacting with one or two people they meet online. No, it can also be, the interaction can also be in the form of engagement within an online community where people from all over the world with different thoughts and values come together, and our students are engaged in this kind of community. So how is this related to our classroom, our foreign language classroom? Is that? Okay. So Alice 2005 says that one of the ways to make sure that you can learn a second language successfully is through getting extensive language input. So for a very long time, when we talk about foreign or second language learning, input is an issue. Why? In many contexts, the only input students can get is through interaction with the foreign language teacher. And some of us may be teaching in a context where access to the foreign language or the second language is extremely limited. And it's even more challenging if the teacher themselves are not native speakers of that particular language. So input can be an issue for a very long time in the second language or foreign language classroom. But nowadays, it's no longer an issue. Input is abundant outside the classroom. So like I said earlier, long before they come into our class, the students are already engaged using the foreign language, are already familiar with some of the culture. So much so that to a certain extent, perhaps we can now look at foreign language learning or foreign language acquisition in a manner that we look at first language acquisition. because acquisition of second language or foreign language can happen in a natural context, in a very in the context how we acquire our first language, and that's the reality. And there are the need for a second language interaction in a foreign language. English, for example, is now is no longer taught or learned as a second or a foreign language, but we talk about English as a lingua franca, as the language of the world. And that changes the way how we teach, the way how we approach teaching the language. One of the effects is, of course, when we are teaching English, we are no longer looking at English in relation to the native speakers. We don't talk about achieving the native speaker's ability. It's not, because there are so many non-native speakers. There are more non-native speakers of English than native speakers of English. So that's the reality of the world. And the input is so the students get so much input, and the input could be further enhanced by the fact that is that next. The fact that many of our students may be living in what Norton Pierce 1995 identified as imagined community, and within the imagined community, they developed what she called imagined identity. What is an imagined community? In the beginning, she talked about this perspective. She talks about the immigrants who migrated to a new country where they need to live within a community that is not originally part of their community, but then because they migrate to this particular country, so it's like an adopted community where they when they move to a new country. So within this community, you would develop what she called an imagined identity. Let me just illustrate something. Yeah? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Big Bang, the group, the K-pop group. It's one of the biggest boy band in the world at the moment, and the fans of this Big Bang group is called the Big Bang Army. Now, I'm not part of that community. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a Big Bang fan. Now, I know this because this is based on my research with my students. So some of my students are part of this Big Bang Army community. So what is the Big Bang Army community? It's a community with, I think, millions of people in that community. And within this community, they share similar interests, views, values. They follow certain rules and regulations. Of course, the rules, the values, the views revolve around Big Bang, definitely. However, the participants or the community, the imagined community of the Big Bang Army comprises of people from different parts of the world, coming into that community, bringing together with them the physical, I call it physical, yeah, the physical culture, the cultural beliefs, their views, their values. And within this community, my students who were part of this community developed an identity. Some of them are very important people within that community. But outside that imagined community, they are our students who, you know, when we look at them, we think, oh, they are this one white-eyed, innocent person. But within this imagined community, no, they are someone else. And their identity within the imagined community to get intertwined with their identity, their physical identity. Let's say if they are from Malaysia, their identity as a Malaysian, their values, their views, intertwine with the values of the imagined community of the Big Bang Army. And that creates a very dynamic community of practice. And this is the students that we are dealing with when they enter our class. So culture at this point of time is no longer the tradition. We can no longer associate culture with that traditionally named culture of like Uzbekistan's culture, Malay culture, or the States culture. It's more than that, because it can be a combination between the culture of the physical being and the culture of the imagined community. Now, we may think that, well, it's just a one-off kind of thing. After 2-3 years, they would forget Big Bang, there will be a new community. It's true, but while they are engaged within that imagined community, they do develop that imagined identity, and that affects their views of a lot of things around them, and that also affects the way they view our foreign language classrooms. Is that? Thank you. So one of the things that may affect how they view our classroom is now they may see our foreign language classroom as part of their investment. This is also from Norton Pierce. So what is investment? According to Norton Pierce, investment is the effort that people people do in order to strengthen their identity, the imagined identity within the imagined community. So now, typically, our students would join our foreign language classroom because why? It's compulsory. It's a subject. It's a compulsory subject. They have to, like in Malaysia, if they learn English, it's a compulsory subject. They must pass English. So that is part of their motivation. They want to pass English. And also because to many, they have no choice. The national examination requires them to pass English. So they are in our class because of that reason. But if they are part of an imagined community, developing an imagined identity, there is a possibility that they do not see our class, they do not attend our class just because it's a requirement for them. They may also be in our class because it's part of their investment. Now, they see our class, our foreign language classroom, as the place where they can improve the language, where they can learn one thing or two so that they can become better speaker, better English or any language, any foreign language user, and that would strengthen or elevate their identity within their imagined community. Next. Is that next? Okay. So with this imagined community, imagined identity investment, how does that affect our classrooms? One is we have to make sure that our class stays relevant. What does that mean? Does this mean we do not have to teach reading, listening, speaking, writing anymore? Does this mean that we do not have to teach grammar anymore? Personally, I would say this is what I call, many scholars call legacy content. When we teach language, we cannot run away from teaching skills, listening, speaking, and all that. We cannot run away from the teaching of grammar, for example. But in the teaching of this legacy content, we must make sure that we support our students' actual language needs. So what do we do? Now we have to ask questions. Okay, let's say in a communicative language teaching classroom, yeah? Is role play activity where the students have to introduce themselves to new friends still relevant? Is the exposure to the British culture, for example, well, if we teach English, is the exposure to the British culture still relevant? Now, I'm not saying it's not. Okay, I'm not saying it's no longer important that you do role play activities in the class. It's no longer important that you introduce the British culture in the class. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that are they still relevant? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves as a teacher. We still need to continue teaching what we have to teach in a language class, but we need to make sure that whatever that we teach are relevant and would support our students' actual language needs. So how do we do this? Okay, next. Is that? Thank you. Well, 21st century learning, to a certain extent, offers us the solutions to all these needs. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about all these approaches in 21st century learning. This is not the platform, and I don't think I'm an expert in all that. But in 21st century learning, we are introduced to a lot of new approaches to language teaching and learning. We have, for example, to name a few, yeah, challenge-based learning, flipped learning, active learning. Now, what do these approaches do actually? Now, what they do is that it allows the students to bring in the input into the classroom. So in the past, the input would maybe 99% from the teacher. The teacher would decide what the students should and must learn. But the new approaches say, no, it's the students who should decide, who should give some input to the teacher on what they want to learn. And this is what all these approaches are doing, allowing the students to bring in their experience, to bring in their knowledge, to bring in their values and views into the classroom. And we as teachers, we positively manipulate. So I use the word positive because manipulate is normally, has a negative connotation. So we positively manipulate this content, this knowledge, this input that our students bring in and design our lesson so that it supports their actual language needs. So in addition to the approaches, there are also a lot of applications nowadays which are widely used in the classrooms. We have quizzes, Socrates. You can, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this already. There are so many research nowadays on the effectiveness of using Instagram, using Twitter into the classrooms. I think these are all, I would say, good efforts, very effective efforts in responding to the changing culture of our classroom. So the classroom is no longer controlled by the teacher. It's the students who would be helping us to design lessons so that they would find our class relevant. Next, is that? However, in the excitement of bringing in the outside world into the classroom, I would like to draw our attention to what I call fancy behaviorism. So what is fancy behaviorism? I define fancy behaviorism as the utilization of contemporary technology or applications to focus on developing grammatical accuracy. Okay, this is a pattern that I observe among my student teachers. So when they are asked to design activities, yes, they are very advanced. So they use Instagram, they use Twitter, they use Facebook, they use all sorts of applications that I've never heard of before. However, the content of the Instagram they create, the Twitter they create is very much focusing on grammatical accuracy. Drilling exercises, closed passages where students have to fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verbs, the correct forms of the words. Now, I'm not saying this is wrong, 100% wrong. There are times when you need to do this to focus on grammatical accuracy. However, we need to ask ourselves, why are we so hooked up on Instagram? Why do we like Twitter so much? Is it because of Instagram? Is it because they are Instagram so we like it? I don't think so, because if we like Instagram because they are Instagram, then we will follow all accounts. We don't. We follow selected accounts. How do we select? Based on our interest. So we look at the content. So what makes Instagram, what makes Twitter, what makes Facebook so interesting is the content. So it's the same thing. When we introduce the use of Instagram, we introduce the use of Twitter in the classroom. We need to make sure that the content is relevant. The content is something that can gauge the students' interest, not losing interest. So we cannot say, oh, because my students love Instagram, so I want to use Instagram in the class. It's not always the way we approach the use of applications, the use of technology in our classroom. Because the fact of the matter is that what is important is not the application. What's important is the content. Okay? Next, Ivan. Okay. So what is fancy behaviorism is an issue that we have to pay attention to, because the primary aim of learning a foreign language is for communicative purposes. The students want to communicate, and they are communicating, and they are in our class so that they can communicate better, so that they can use the language better. Now, again, there are situations where, yes, we need to teach our students grammatical accuracy, because that's what they need, that's fine. But what we need to remember is that grammatical accuracy is a luxury only the fluent deems necessary. So if our students are not fluent language user as yet. Perhaps grammatical accuracy is something that they can acquire as they are learning how to communicate. Who would notice grammatical errors normally? English teachers, English lecturers, but the majority of the public would notice, because what they focus on would be the communication bit, that you are able to express your ideas clearly. That's what's important. Is that? So I come to the end of my presentation. I would like to end this with this quote that I normally share with my students. The outside world, especially the virtual one, offers so much information and entertainment that our class, if not handled correctly, is a dismal space which students may detest. They may not think that our language classroom, our foreign language classroom, is not worth their investment. And that's when they lose all interest, and that's when we would say, oh, the students are not interested in learning the language, or the students are not interested to be in our class. They are not, they are interested. In fact, they might be engaged heavily using the foreign language in the classroom. It's the way we handle our classroom that affects their interest. Is that? So with that, I thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope I have managed to fulfill what the organizing committee wants me to do. So that's my email. So if there's anything you would like to discuss further, feel free to email me. So thank you very much again, Dr. Azim, Dr. Divnoza, all the fellow presenters and participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now, I would like to extend a special welcome to all our guests of honor and our students, keynote speakers. From all United States, United States of America, please, it's your floor.
Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Good morning. Good morning to Uzbekistan and good afternoon to Malaysia. This is such a great collaboration, and looking at this, conference today, I'm so excited because we're uniting 3 countries, Malaysia, Uzbekistan, and the United States. This is very exciting. And all participants, we're very sorry for technology glitch. You know how it happens. We apologize for any inconvenience. I hope you understand what happened, but I think it's very important. The discussion we're having today is so critical. And I would like to thank for inviting me for this conference, all the conference organizers especially, and then the committee for giving me the opportunity to talk about the foreign language development and its cultural value. I would like also to thank, both Uzbekistan team and Malaysia team. They did an amazing job every night working on this conference. With that, I would like to highlight the importance of this conference and the issue of foreign language in today's world. So to begin with, I would like to say thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and research interests and your report, Dr. Maizat Muhammad. It was so on top. And this ideas, what you were talking actually relates so much to my research that have been done. And I would like to share today the, theoretical part and also the practical part of my research. I think what you were talking about, having difficulties being non-native and teaching foreign languages, it's hard. And we cannot blame teachers. At the same time, we cannot blame students for being not motivated in those classrooms, right? So today I'm going to talk about my research that I did for my dissertation, Adult Students' World Language Literacy and Culture Learning Experiences in Non-Formal Settings. Let's go to the next slide, please. The reason why I'm calling, non-formal setting, I'll explain, but I would like to say that what Dr. Maiza was talking about, it relates. It's a new way of looking into teaching and learning foreign languages, but today we're calling them world languages. This presentation consists of introduction, background, context and methods, findings, and discussion. So, as interest in various learning settings is rapidly increasing, so too is the need to search students' learning and experiences in such settings. I looked at this research as a big, conceptual lens and looked at the information to find more about what is missing, what we need to do. But my goal was specifically looking at students learning world languages and cultures and literacies in such settings. Next slide, please. So, non-formal learning settings are one example. For example, as you can see on this picture, this is one classroom teaching Indian language as part of the World Language and Culture program that I built in Wyoming in 2013. It's a non-formal learning, and I'll explain why I'm using the term non-formal. I define non-formal learning as a flexible, something semi-structural. It's not formal. When we say formal education, formal learning, we're talking about specifically classrooms where we grade, where students come, learn formally, they earn certificates, they earn diplomas. But when we're talking about informal learning or informal education, this is a different type of, right? So I'm talking about three types of learning. Informal learning, where parent and child, are learning together. Or, for example, mentor and mentee are working together in informal setting. It could be in the cafe. It could be in the different settings. But I'm looking today at non-formal learning setting that combines both learning together. And I would like to pay attention to the term because non-formal learning is spelled by many scholars with hyphen. If you use hyphen within that word, it means there is no education. But we're talking about complementary, supplementary, something to the, goes with formal education and both informal education. That's why I named my research in my setting, the, language program I'm running as non-formal learning. So why this research is significant, because the few empirical studies that have been conducted only looked at the world language and culture learning. Most studies were either, conducted in the specific laboratories, with respect to medicine, with respect to, for example, study abroad or other areas, but not clearly, we couldn't find research, empirical studies that have been conducted in non-formal settings with respect to languages and cultures. So that's why the purpose I picked was adult students' learning and experiences in the World Language and Culture program, and we called it non-formal setting. The two research questions I asked in my study were, what did adult students learn in the World Language and Culture program, and what did adult students experience in the World Language and Culture program? Because those two questions are so critical and important in order for me to come up with the practical suggestions, recommendations, and to find out the ways how can we make our learning, our classrooms, helpful, beneficial, and how can we help teachers to be, great in their classrooms, or how can we look at the students and how can we think about how can we help them. So to begin with, I conducted literature review, and I looked close to 75 studies, but unfortunately, only 18 empirical studies were included. If you ask me why, because majority of documents that I found were either reports or literature reviews or kind of essays, but not empirical studies. That's why only 18 empirical studies were included in this study. Specifically, I use DEEP approach and IAPI curriculum model that stands for interpret, analyze, present, and interact. So as a result of my literature review, you can see that I had 3 themes: the consequences of learning in non-formal settings, the ways that adults learned in non-formal settings, and the reasons adults studied in non-formal settings. So that was a kind of like more findings from my literature review that helped me to understand why adult students were joining the world language, like for example, non-formal settings, like world language and culture programs if they had one. So with respect to theoretical framework, we know that every research has their own specific either theoretical framework or conceptual framework. So coming from deep education theoretical framework, I used DEEP approach to teaching and learning world languages and cultures. Specifically, in order to understand why and how my students learn, I used 4 tenets of IAPI curriculum model. Here is kind of like, the picture, so you can have an idea how this curriculum model looks like. As you can see, you could use any projects in your classroom. For example, it could be any interdisciplinary, subject or anything that you could use. And you can see this model divided into 2 main categories: access and voice. The reason why I'm showing you this curriculum model, because if we before were talking about reading, writing, speaking, and listening, now this model is becoming a new way of looking into our teaching and learning. For example, as you can see, access is divided into 2 specific sections: interpret and analyze, which interpret means reading, watching. That's what Dr. Maiza was talking today, right? It could be anything, any approach you're using in your classroom, or listening. It could be news, or it could be any students are, doing dialogue and you're listening. So analyze, specifically, it's focus on language. When we say focus on language, we're talking about either grammar, specific contextual, ideas, or specific contextual, words we're using here. And with respect to voice, we have 2 sections which talks about present and interact. So when we're talking about present, we're talking about what students produce. They write, they speak, or they can be recording, because today, in today's world, specifically now, we're all using Zoom classrooms, we're using videos, we're using lots of technology. So students may be presenting not only just, their essays, but they can record those essays and produce their work. Interact, when we're talking about exchanging an act, it could be any theater, for example, related, talks, or it could be any discussions, or it could be any partnership between, different universities where students are interacting. So specifically, with respect to context and method, I used qualitative research design, and I designed my work as descriptive case study, okay? So this research happened in the World Language and Culture program at a large Western land-grant university in the United States. I only chose 7 adult students for this research because they had to go through specific criteria in order to be included in this research. And I will be just very quick here because I think the important part is my findings. So data collection included 4 classes. I looked at French class, Hebrew class, Spanish class, and Tajik class. So, and you can see here my data sources because qualitative research involves interviews, field notes and observation, artifacts, and any related videos when we're talking about artifacts, lesson plans, anything. So I included everything we're collecting in this research. Of course, all the data were transcribed. So yes, we can go ahead to the next slide. So it's all about data sources. And specifically, I used semantic analysis to analyze my data. And for those of you, for our participants, I want to tell you that if you're interested or you are starting, a new way, like you're just conducting your research for the first time and you're doing a qualitative research, please use the semantic analysis. Brown and Clarke explained specifically how can you analyze your data. So it's so one by one, so clearly explained, and it would be very helpful for those of you who are conducting their research for the first time. Next, please. I use two types of coding, open coding and a descriptive coding. The reason why I use this coding, because it helped me to understand what specifically, in the interviews, observations, and artifacts I'm seeing, and also the specific meaning that I'm taking from those, coding with my own notes or with my own memos. So here kind of like, examples of coding, you can take a look how I did it. So with respect to learning, with respect to experience, I tried to separate specific terms, and you can see from here. Next slide, please. So findings. This is the very critical part of the research. Anytime we're conducting research, it's must thing that we need to focus on findings, because half of your presentation or your research should talk about the way how you conducted your, the way how you looked, but findings are very critical. Next, please. So what did adult students learn? When I was looking at this question specifically, I found two major themes: what adult students learned and how adult students learned, okay? So let's go to what adult students learned. And with respect to, next slide, please. With respect to what adult students learned, we can see that we call here functional literacy practices when I was, conducting my research. But recently, when I was looking at other literature, I found that it's everyday learning practices. We're talking about reading, we're talking about speaking, we're talking about writing here. The reason why I'm using only these three concrete examples, because that's what I found as a result of my research with my participants. Next, please. So, for example, let's take a look at this example. One of my participants, with respect to this functional literacy practices, when he was talking about reading, he said, I learned only how to read words. That's the critical part. When he joined the classroom, he focused and he found that his focus is most on reading. It's the student who's telling me this, right? So, and when I looked at my observation, I found that, yes, why the student was keep telling me that he learned or focused on reading, because the teacher was focusing on reading. As you know, Hebrew is an ancient, language, and they were talking about the historical facts. They were learning about, Hebrew. How could you read? Like, how can you recognize the letters? Next, please. And then another example is I picked from another student who was learning, for example, I think it was a French class, and she was more talking about speaking, because their classroom, was focusing on speaking skills, making sure students can talk, communicate with each other. And you can see, I'm not going to read, she says, we basically had a topic, and looking at this topic, we had to describe situations. So they're talking about either dialogues, or they had to create videos and learn French. Okay, next, please. With respect to writing, my, Chris, it's his pseudonym, he thought about Tajik class that he learned about more writing, because he wanted to know so much about Cyrillic writing, and they learned about Tajik through Cyrillic, Cyrillic writing. So he said that he tried to understand the letters, trying to, look at the grammar of, Tajik, how the sentences are built. That was very fun for him. And the reason why I say he specifically focused on writing, every time I came to observe this classroom, I saw students going up and writing on the blackboard. It was amazing. Next, please. So here is the example so that you can see what I'm talking about, how Chris on the left, writing a sentence in cursive Cyrillic, okay? And the teacher is just watching and guiding him. Thank you. Next, please. So here, with respect to, again, what did adult students learn? I found that they learned aspects of culture, you know? It's important, and it was amazing that I was, you know, was able to see that. So aspects of culture, when we're talking about aspects of culture, we're talking about specific behavioral attitudes of specific culture or some specific detailed information, right? So here I found that students were learning either geography, they were learning either religion or traditions. It's not separate. They weren't having class separate about geography, religion, or traditions. They were, you know, learning together when they were learning languages like geography. Let's go to the next slide, please, and we can see. For example, Chris, remember, I just, you know, presented his work with respect to writing. He learned geography while he was writing, you know. He learned about Tajikistan, about Central Asia. He learned about how mountains were so spectacular and how those, you know, mountains are similar or different from Wyoming. It was amazing to listen how he was learning. Next slide, please. With respect to religion, you can see the student who was learning Hebrew, and you can see that, right? Hebrew, they were learning more focusing on religion. So he was able to learn about Jewish culture. And I didn't bring another, you know, student here, but he was amazing. He, Mohat, another one of my participants, he was looking at how Jewish culture and Arabic culture were similar or different. They were so much into this conversation. It was just, you know, interesting to look and listen to them. Next, please. Traditions. With respect to traditions, one of my participants who was learning Spanish thought that she was more focusing on traditions. Since the teacher was from Argentina, they were learning about Argentinian culture, you know, how, for example, Latin culture was different in Argentina or other countries. And she said that the teacher, Maria, was always talking about the food, the way how she cooks, you know, and she could invite students to her house, you know, to kind of like show their culture, the way how they cook, the way how they host people. Next, please. So now the second important question was how adult students learned. And with respect to that, I found that they learned through practice. We all talk about practice, 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 right? Next, please. Then they also learned, I think I had to push something. Oh, it's okay. So with respect to their learning through practice, we found that in Spanish class, for example, students were focusing on writing. And they were practicing, you can see here as an example, how the student was, you know, writing his essay in Spanish and trying to explain his thoughts about education. Next slide, please. Also, with respect to how adult students learn, I found that they learn through work with peers. That's very important. You know that in order to motivate our students, either we have to pair them or we want to make sure that they work in the team. It's impossible to learn the language alone, you know. It could be, but not encouraged, right? Next, please. And you can see here the example again. The student who was taking Spanish said it was very interesting, you know. And then they did different exercises, writing prompts that was helpful to him. And then he could, you know, either help other students who were behind because his Spanish was pretty advanced, or he would just help the teacher, you know, leave the classroom. Next, please. So with respect to, again, how students learn, I found that, you know, they also, for example, in French class, they particularly practice dialogues or recording themselves and talking about specific topics. Like, you know, they had particular situation that was very interesting to students. It's not the teacher made them to, you know, prepare or talk about specific topics, but what students were interested. So they prepared, for example, about, you know, restaurants. If they travel to Paris or France, what could they do? How can they exchange ideas? Next slide, please. So here you can see, this is an example how Mohat and Alex are engaging in a dialogue while teacher is watching, okay? And she could come and listen and help them if there is something they're missing. Next slide, please. So last final, specific what they learned about, world languages and cultures, I found that students learn through teachers' feedback and scaffolding. This is very particular and very, particular to language learning. And not only, I think, in all disciplines, we need teachers' feedback and scaffolding. What we're talking is not just, saying, yes, you're right or wrong. No, guiding them, facilitating your discussion, your talk, so that your students can see you as an example and they can work throughout on their own. You're just the person who showed them the examples, So here you can see that the student who was learning Tajik, he told that he really liked, reading and writing in Cyrillic, because what happened, remember in that picture, the teacher was all the time observing, watching, and providing feedback. Or he would show an example. Let's go to the next slide, please, and we can see the great example here. Here is what I'm talking about. You see? So you can see the teacher is providing a feedback. So in this picture, the Tajik teacher is explaining the word qabristan. Qabristan. The difference between qabr, I think, is all who learn, who know Arabic, what does qabr mean, and then stan. What does stan means? Let's go to the next slide, please. Another example, scaffolding here, you can see from my field notes, what I found is that when he was talking about the word qabristan, he's talking about the connection, the root, qabr, graveyard, right? And with its suffix, stan, the place or the state. He's explaining, this is the state, it means that. And then you can see, Chris says, is that graveyard or place? And then teacher says, yes. He's not telling him specifically, hey, this is what is translation. He's guiding him. And then the student says, oh, yes, this is a graveyard, And the teacher says, yes, let's practice now. You see, scaffolding happens when you're not just using the same example, but you're giving another example to show the students so they can follow you. Gulistan. It says, what is Gulistan now, Chris? And then he says, oh, I think the student is like, keeping silent. And then the teacher says, Gul means, and then the student has to answer, Of course, if they don't know, you can draw, like you could draw the picture of the flower, right? And says, let me give you a hint. What is Lola? Lola. Lola means a gul, right? It's a flower. And then he says, oh, yes, this is tulip, And then the teacher says, yes, what is tulip? When he draws the picture of the tulip, the student says, it's flower. Okay. And then teacher says, yes, then Gulistan means the place of flower. It's the name of the city, right? For example, in Uzbekistan. That's kind of an example how you could use in your classroom, specific particular explanations. Next slide, please. So, as summary, I wanted to show you that we all talk about how language and culture are, should be, learned interconnected way, in an interconnected way. It's inseparable. This is the example how, students learned culture and language together. We're not talking about having your specific or separate class only about culture. It's impossible to learn. Students can go look at the dictionary, look at the website, blog, they can find it. But the way how you teach the culture in your setting, in your language classroom, reflects a lot on students. And that's why what Dr. Maiza was talking about, if you're a non-native, it's so hard because you haven't explored the culture yourself. How can you talk about English, English culture, for example, right? That's why with that idea, I created this World Language and Culture program. And I hope that program will become a model it's now becoming very open and as a model to the United States, other states, programs. But I hope the other countries in the world will start implementing. This program is free. If you ever want, to learn more about it, you can always email me. You can ask. You can join to watch how our classes are built. It's online now. We're teaching virtually. So I think it's very important to bring native speakers, And I'm not saying that non-native speakers shouldn't teach. No. We should be, because in some countries like Uzbekistan, Malaysia, where can we find them, right? We have our own teachers. So what I'm saying with that is having the opportunity to bring, create the labs where, native speakers can become helper or can become a great resources for our non-native speakers. Like, for example, it could be any American embassies, for example, right? Or it could be any students who went to exchange programs. There are lots of programs exist right now are, existing, and students are participating and they can do that. So the second part, very quickly, I want to talk through about what I also found. When I said what did adult students experience, can you go please back a little bit? I think we, please, I think somebody was telling it. More, back please again. More, go back please. It should be, yes. Okay, so with respect to what did adult students experience, I found that they were emotionally engaged. This is very critical. If your students are not engaged emotionally, that's so hard to motivate them in your classroom. Of course, I wouldn't say that all people in this, setting were positive. No, there were some negative, experiences. So, for example, in this example, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So like my participant who was taking Spanish, she said she had a hard time because she used to learn Spanish in the classroom in high school. And in high school, the teacher explains, writes everything on the board. The idea of this setting was the native speaker only uses the language. There is no way to talk in English because they're learning Spanish. Even the teacher is explaining basic Spanish. She was supposed to say, we are learning today about Spanish, endings, for example, right? But she found it hard. She said, I cannot learn the way like I'm learning here. And it's okay, our students are different. The way how we perceive learning is different, Next slide, please. I think we missed the positive, but I just want to very quickly to tell you that positive feedback was that students really liked interacting with their native speaker teachers, because they could ask any questions. They could, look at their behaviors. They could look and say, oh, I thought, for example, people from Uzbekistan act this way, or people from Malaysia would do this way, but they were able to see the reality. They could ask questions. The second, what I found in my research, that they were personally engaged. When we say personal engagement, we're talking about self-reflections. Students were self-reflecting, not the teacher. Students were doing that. Let's see the example, please. Next slide. On that next slide, you can see that coming from a homeschooling, one student says that, oh, I think we missed, yes. He says that, you're welcome to read, I'm going just to talk. So in the United States, that either you go to school or you are homeschooled, okay? Because homeschooling was so, close to this non-formal setting strategy, or like, the way how we use this approach. He found, it was helpful to him. And he said that, it seemed to me that that's what I was doing at home. And that's why I could, stop when I need, or like, continue my learning later. Nobody was saying to me, no, you missed this class today, you cannot come, or you cannot learn anymore because you didn't understand this topic. Okay, next, please. The next thing was that they were also doing self-study. Okay, so students were in this setting, nobody could say, hey, here is your homework. Teachers could say, those who want to practice can take this homework. Or if you need more resources, let me share with you. You can go and learn. So this is an example of self-study. Next slide, please. So you can see that I was talking, and this is part of my, dialogue interview. I said, how many hours do you spend on learning Tajik, Chris? He said, 20 hours. Can you imagine? Outside of the class. So not only he's coming and learning in the classroom 1 hour a week, he was using 20 hours. That means either he said he booked one day, he only learned Tajik. Like, for example, he could listen, watch videos, all those things. Next slide, please. And my final theme was that with respect to what students experience, so it was engaging in the relationship building. So it's a student-student relationship, importantly. Next slide, please. And here you can see how students were engaged in this picture, right? For example, Ed, who took Spanish class, was explaining to beginners about specific term or the way how he could use, specific words. Next slide, please. And then the second one is also, here is another example. Next slide, please. Is teacher-student relationship. That's important. When we say teacher, next slide, please, you can see the example. Teacher-student relationship, we're not talking about just caring and being nice. It means like, whatever your student says, say yes, yes, yes. No, what we're saying is that respecting your student, but making sure they have the resources. You can guide them. You don't have to, for example, be like a tutor there or like, be specific for the student. No, what we're saying is that in a nice way, maybe providing more, or maybe even, as we said, sometimes for non-native, teachers, it's hard to teach. Maybe you could say, hey, could you go to this person? Could you go to this embassy? They have a free sessions, could you learn about, your topic from them? Kind of like, giving like recommendations, okay? So here you can see that the teacher, he really liked how the teacher could explain things, write down, and they built a really close relationship in the Tajik class. For example, teacher could take him to the coffee hour where Tajik people could, could get together just to show the culture. Next slide, please. Here is another example how Chris and his teacher worked, you see. For example, he always could ask a question and then the teacher could explain from the book, or like, the Chris could come and say, hey, this is what I read. Is that true in Tajikistan? Next slide, please. So this is another example how they play ping pong, learn from each other. Next slide, please. So important part, okay? So why is this topic is important, and why what I found is important? For example, with pedagogical implications, I would say that, for adult students in non-formal settings, it's important that they are guided. And for teachers in non-formal settings, it's important that they have help. They have some resources, so they can, they know how to utilize those resources. Next slide, please. I also did lots of recommendations for adult students and for teachers. If you're interested, please let me know. I can share my, dissertation with you and share the link. It's published. I'm not going to talk all the recommendations, but important recommendation, I think I talked a little bit throughout, making sure adult students, when we're talking about the learners should be motivated. And when we say motivated, making sure that it's coming from you. Let the teacher know what you want to learn. Let the teacher know what you need from them. And teachers, for example, teachers could utilize, laptops, like, classrooms. They could invite native speakers. They could invite guest speakers. Or they could, participate in webinars, learn new, resources to share with their students. Just doing it, doing it in action. Next, please. So, and here just an example. If you can screenshot, you're welcome. Next slide, please. It's important specifically I focus on recommendations, so you can see I have particular recommendations because we're not talking about just language and culture. We said that it should be interconnected. We're talking about how, those important recommendations are critical for cross-cultural learning, for intercultural learning, for diversity. In the United States, diversity is a big issue. We want to make sure, those recommendations are particular to students and teachers. Next slide, please. So, again, my big implication was that non-formal settings can be supplemental. Please don't look at it as a separate thing, and just kind of give you a little background so that you know why I got interested in non-formal setting. It's from my own life experience. I have published a couple of chapters in books. You're welcome to read. But, when I was a student, a high school student in Uzbekistan, in Central Asia, I learned English from Peace Corps volunteers. You all know Peace Corps volunteers came to all our countries, and thanks to the government of the United States for having this opportunity. They used beautiful classrooms, additional that we were, from after school, I could go to those centers, speak or talk to native speaker, and they never used Uzbek or Russian. They only talked to me English. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I didn't understand, but that helped me how to go, further, how to, to utilize English language. So after that, I started looking and understanding what is helping me, how I'm learning the language. And when I came to do my master's and PhD in the United States, my thinking was, how can I contribute? What can I do in order to help American students or other international students to learn world languages? And that's how I created this setting. You see, I had the example already in Central Asia. Using that example, I brought it to the United States to give back to the community, to do service. And all work that I've been doing throughout my, graduate program was volunteer work. Because I was so passionate. I'm teaching Uzbek for free for anyone who wants to learn. I actually had a new student from Malaysia yesterday, was excited to learn about Uzbek. So that's how we learn, and I think whatever you're doing should be impacting your research, the way how you do things, the way how you, look at the things. That's so that you understand why I was interested in this work. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick note, I'm not going to talk much about it, but with respect to theoretical implications, my study showed that, deep approach is so important. You saw that examples, right? The big chart that I showed you today. We're not talking separately about speaking, writing, listening. We're talking about how students can utilize whatever they can in order so they can learn, and how teachers can help them or provide resources that are helpful to them. So when I was looking at this, conceptual framework, I thought, how can I make a contribution? Because when we're doing a research, we need to also look at how can we do not only, contribution to practical part, but also to the, conceptual lens. So my contribution was self-organized model that I created as a result of my research. Next slide, please. So you can see here, next slide, please. You can see a really nice chart here. So this is what I found. Remember, I talked about particularly what students learned and what students experienced. So you can see that I looked at those two particular things. And believe it or not, you're all here, professors, teachers, tutors. So how students experience themselves or their learning in non-formal settings impacted their learning, okay? So that's why it's important to look how students are learning first, or what they're learning, like what they're experiencing, in order to help them to learn things. And you can see that, I talked about what Dr. Maiza talked about today, valuing each learner as an individual, involving all this emotional engagement, affect states, like positive or negative experiences, promoting self, engagement, self-reflection, self-study. And especially supporting, a rapport, like, the teacher-student, student-teacher relationship. Next slide, please. The next slide is like just so, the yellow part is my conceptual lens already. If you are ever interested, please look for Dr. Tochon, has, created this deep approach theory and the conceptual lens. And orange part is my contribution. I was so happy to make a contribution in addition to his theory. So yeah, you can use it. You can look at his deep education theory as well. He has published many books. Next slide, please. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my, specific research work. If you have any questions, always, email us or find me on YouTube, Facebook. I have my own page. And also, anytime, please, try to just reach us out and see the examples. Or I'll be happy to, to help or, kind of like advise or like maybe recommend some resources as well. Thank you so much. And if our facilitators want to open the floor for questions, we're ready with Dr. Maiza.
Hello. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to hear you, Dr. Azim, but any participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to, either type them in the chat box, Q&I, or also you can, I think you can unmute yourself and maybe ask a question. I have one from Raja Noor. Thank you so much, first of all, for your feedback. They said, the VLCP is an excellent immersion program. To position it within a non-formal setting is a great to see how students invested their time and energy. Thank you so much. I think, yes, that's true.
Thank you very much. I would like I believe that the language is a certain also the phenomenon. There is a deep relationship between language, software, and technology. When we study a language, we have to keep in mind that the graphical and the functional area use this language to further the software and the society needs to be used. One of the best ways to learn about language, psychology, and software is to seek out opportunities to do beyond our typical process skills. Studying abroad, for example, bring many challenges that can turn into valuable action. Language can play a big role in how we and others can see the world. So we need to build both with our efforts will be continued to reach our goals in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Azim. I think it was hard to, clearly hear you because of the connection, I think. But
Okay, questions for Dr. Daniela?
this is an opportunity for participants to ask questions.
Thank you for the keynote speakers, Dr. Mariza and Dr. Dinoza. Now we will have a short break for a 10 minutes break before we will start with our next presenter. So stay tuned, we will come in back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bridge dah. Bikin maybe watch you can do.
Dear all, now we are going to continue our conference. Before we continue, I would like to say thank you again to our speakers just now. It was so great to hear from US and Malaysia. It's an eye-opening research. Thank you very much for the speakers. So from UPSI, we will hand in the floor to Ms. Saida to conduct for the presenters for this evening. Thank you. Over to you, Saida.
The Honorable Mr. and Madam Speakers, distinguished guests, fellow students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Assalamu alaikum, Salamat petang. First of all, I would like to welcome you all once more to this joint international practical video conference between Churchill State Pedagogical Institute and University Pendidikan Sultan Idris. My name is Saida Gazieva and I'm a teacher in Churchill State Pedagogical Institute, and it's my privilege to be the moderator of today's conference. Of course, our institute also has doctors of sciences, professors and teachers, but today's conference is mainly attended by young teachers with their presentations. It has not been long since the opening of our Department of Foreign Languages, so it is natural that today's conference will be an experience for us and will be held in the future. So now let me invite our presentators. Our today's first presentator is Diana Abdurrahmanova from Churchill State Pedagogical Institute with the theme relationship between culture and language. So Diana, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, but I start. Oh, okay, I started. So, good afternoon, dear professors, teachers, and colleagues. My name is Diana Abdurrahmanova. I'm glad to have a great experience to present our work on the topic relationship of language, culture, and society. So, let me start with with your permission. So, next slide, please. Here's a quote by a well-known contemporary writer, Khaled Hosseini, which is, in our point of view, expresses the main idea of our presentation. Let us read the quotation. If culture is a house, then language is a key to the front door to all the rooms inside. So this quotation was taken from the novel A Thousand Planet Suns. Next slide, please. So our presentation consists of two parts, the theoretical and practical part. In the theoretical part, we will consider the notions of language and culture and society, the relationship between language and society, the relationship between language and culture, the relationship between culture and society. The practical part deals with the influence of culture to the language. Next slide, please. So, before starting, let me say the keywords for our presentation. Language, culture, society, realist, stereotype, nonverbal communication, and intercultural communication. So, first let us analyze the meaning of language, culture, and society concepts with the help of renowned linguists. So, according to David Crystal, language is a system of conventional, spoken, manual, or written symbols by means of which human beings as members of a social group and participants in its culture express themselves. So, next one. According to Krakowski, culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people defined by everything from language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and art that are generally considered to be the tradition of that people and are transmitted from generation to generation. Next slide, please. So, according to the online dictionary, society is an organized group of persons associated together for religious, benevolent, cultural, scientific, political, and patriotic or other purposes. So, next slide, please. Let us consider the relationship between language and society based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, the language primarily is a product of collective labor, and it's created to unite people together. This is the main feature of relationship with society as a whole. With the help of the language, the cultural heritage of the world and different nations pass down from generations to generation. And due to the language, achievements of mankind concerning science, technology, art, and culture are in use by modern human beings and continue to progress. So next slide, please. Here we can see the relationship between language and culture. So features of each language are caused by the mentality and history which certain people have lived through. The subject of language and culture is always person, an individual or society. Please, next slide. According to the IT sociologist Ron McGivern, we can see the relationship between culture and society. So the culture is associated with the active participation of the person. It is created by people. It is developing under the influence of new theories, new phenomena of reality. So since the 21st century is the century of high technologies, we know, yes, the human culture changes, lifestyle, art, social structure, family relationships, etc. So next slide. Okay, so according to the report of Professor David Crystal, the writer, editor, lecturer, and broadcaster of the English linguistics, pragmatics, and English language, he's a great linguist. Yes, we know English linguist. So on the English conference, he said, to predict the future evolution of the language, it is crucial to understand not only the present, but also the past, taking the cultural background fully into account. And that is precisely why it is so important to keep our eyes and our ears wide open in order to know what is going in India and China nowadays, where we notice the most significant evolution of the English language. Next slide, please. So here we can, in this picture, we can see the cultural iceberg model that was created by Edward Hall in 1976. This model is linguocultural substance drawing an analogy with an iceberg. Yeah, Hall believed that the culture of a society is like an iceberg. For 90%. Is hidden under the surface, and on the surface, a person faces only 10% of it. For example, it may be language, dress, literature, food, and under the surface, something that difficult to see. For example, it may be gestures, manners, family roles, attitude towards school, etc., etc. So the next slide demonstrates the definition to this cultural iceberg model. Next slide. So there is no to the practical part of our work. Therefore, we come to the practical part of our work. Let us consider a few examples of culture due to some circumstances affect the language. So the first example. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So the first example is private. For example, the word private doesn't exist in a word in many languages. It's often due to different cultural aspects, you know. For example, the next Eskimos have 24 words for snow. It's also clear, yes? This nation is in an area where snow is almost constant phenomenon. Here is just some Eskimo slow listing. For example, Canuck is used for snowflake. Connect is used for frost. No, the previous slide, please. Previous slide, yeah. Thank you. Kanavlok, it's fine snow. Kanikak, it's just snow on ground. Or for example, Pirkis is blizzard. Or Kanikaruk, snow bank. So the different words that's explaining the word snow. The third word just which describe moral concepts can be unique to countries or areas. For example, in Uzbek language, okabat, there is something like confidence, but this concept has the more deep meaning. So we describe this meaning with more words, yes, not just translating. So the next colors in different languages also don't coincide. For example, in Russian language, синий, голубой. And for example, when we translate to the English language, голубой, it's just like blue, and синий, dark blue. Yes. So next slide, please. As we know, body language is used is the use of physical behavior, expressions and mannerisms to communicate non-verbally, often done instinctively rather than consciously. So we can see, looking at this gesture, each person, depending on what culture it belongs to, will have different understanding of it. Let us consider what this particular gesture means in different parts of the world. So next slide, please. For Italians, this gesture means, what exactly do you mean? What exactly do you mean? Next slide. As for Egyptians, this gesture means, by the way, means be patient. By the way, in Uzbek culture, also this gesture means the same thing as for Egyptians, but in much rude form, let us say. So, next slide, please. As for Greek people, this gesture means that's just perfect. So, next slide, please. The next aspect that undoubtedly affects the development of the language and the influence of is an influence of culture to the language by cultural stereotypes. So, what is cultural stereotype? It's an overgeneralization of some characteristics of a group of people, a country, or a region. So, next slide, please. We know that stereotypes appear very slowly, sometimes never, yes? So, next slide, please. Here's some examples of stereotypes. Spanish, for example, our people are always dancing flamenco. Of course, it's not so, yeah? We know that each person is different. So, next, Italian eat pasta every day. Or in Morocco, people have little hygiene. In Portugal, people drive crazy. Maybe, maybe not. All Americans agree on death penalty. Of course not. And in different states, it's also different meanings for it, yeah? The best machines come from Germany. Somehow, I agree with this. So, next slide, please. So also it should also be noted that ethnographic realia also have a great influence on the language. Realia, plural noun, we know, yeah. There are some words and expressions for culture-specific material elements. Realia mustn't be confused with the terminology. The latter is primarily used in the scientific literature. Next slide, please. Here we give some examples on realia in different languages in the field of cuisine. Let us look at them in more detail. For example, the first one is Christmas pudding. We all know these words and even don't think about its etymology. Yeah. Next slide. Marzipan, yeah. Many of these words we use in our language without thinking of their true origin and influence of to our language or to foreign languages. Next slide. Here is an extract from the work of the famous Russian writer Nikolai Vasilievich Gogol, Dead Souls, Мертвые души, which presents Russian realities. There are so many realities in one sentence, in only one sentence. For example, грибки, пирожки, скородумки, шанишки, пряглы, блины, припеки, припеки с лучком, припеки с маком, припеки с творогом, припеки со сняточками. Let's move to next slide. Here's just the definitions of these words, of this realia. So, скородумки is an old recipe for pancakes, or for example, шанишки, or for example, прягла, pancake or thick pancake in oil, yeah, or сняточки are smelled like fish, yeah, and so on. Lots of realia in our literature. Next slide, please. Here we came to Uzbek realia, plov. This is a dish consisting of rice, meat, and carrots. You know, yeah? There are much more realia such as sumalak, khalin, samsa. They are very tasty. Therefore, you are always welcome to Uzbekistan. We are happy to treat you. Next slide. And also, we want to present, it's very interesting for us, for our culture also, the realities from Malay food. Very interesting, yeah? You know, it's somehow similar to our cuisine also. Nasi lemak is a Malay cuisine dish consisting of fragrant rice, if I'm not mistaken, yes, cooked in coconut milk and pandan leaf. So nasi lemak was mentioned also in the book Circumstances of a Malay Life, written by Sir Richard Olaf Winstead in 1909. Next, also the next picture, the second picture is Khao Thai. Is also very oily rice noodles, yes, with fried eggs, soy sprouts, if I'm not mistaken, etc., etc. And the third picture is ice kacang. Crushed ice with condensed milk, corn, peanuts, and multicolored syrup. Yes, it sounds and looks unusual, but it's worth a try. Okay, next slide, please. The influence of culture to the language by phraseological unit. It is believed that every nation has the keywords. They are mostly used in proverbs and sayings, you know, in which the spirit of the people is reflected. For example, for British culture, such words are attention, order, accuracy. For Russian culture, such words are the soul, destiny, sadness. So next slide, please. Here, let's compare two set expressions in Russian and English. For example, nobody is here. Здесь ни души. In English, the meaning of the concept carries a physical perception, yeah? And in the Russian, it's spiritual. While translating, for example, literally translating, yeah? The Russian phrase we will translate, there is no soul, yeah? Okay, next slide, please. Our analysis under the same understanding and the relationship of language, culture, and society has brought us to the following conclusion that language is a mirror of the culture of a certain society. It reflects not only the real world surrounding the person, not just the actual conditions of his life, but also the social consciousness of the people, their mentality, their national character, and the way of life, traditions, customs, morals, values, attitudes, vision of world, and lots of maybe national psychology, spirituality, the outlook, everything of the entire people, yes? So, at the ending of my presentation, next slide, is a quotation by David Crystal. Next slide. And if you, here is some references for my presentation. And next slide, please. And so, if you have any questions, you are welcome, please.
Thank you, Diana, very much. It was really interesting to know about cultures and gestures. If any questions for presenter Diana Abdurrahmanova from our participants, you may ask. Okay, now it is turn for our second presenter, Honorable Dr. Noraini Zulkepli from Malaysia with the theme Preserves ESL Teachers' Participation in a Virtual Community, a Positive Psychology View. Welcome, Dr. Noraini.
Okay, thank you very much, Saida.
Yes.
All right, okay. I'm Noraini Zulkepli. So the topic of my presentation is Preserves ESL Teachers' Participation in a Virtual Community, a Positive Psychology View. Okay, next slide, please. So I have structured my presentation. I've divided my presentation into 4 parts. The first part is whereby I will talk a bit on 3 psychological constructs or in other words, individual differences that are related to my study. The second part would be, I will talk about the study itself. The third part is the findings. And the fourth part is a bit of my reflection on the role of culture in relation to the participation of the participants in my study. Yeah? Okay, is that next slide, please, is that? All right, thank you. Okay, I will start my presentation with a quote here by Ross and Stark, whereby they say that language learning, be it in class or out of class, is an emotionally loaded experience, as it is often imbued with positive and negative feelings and experiences. Yeah? What it means here is that when we speak a second language, when a learner speaks a second language, most often the experience speaking the language will lead to either positive or negative feelings. If the communication is successful, the learner will feel good. But if the communication is unsuccessful, maybe with a bit of embarrassing moments, then these negative feelings will somehow what we call that influence his or her participation in future discourse or verbal discourse. Okay, is that next slide, please? Okay, there's a picture of an elephant in a room there, So according to Swin, Swin refers to the place of emotions in this field, it means in language learning field, as the elephants in the room, poorly studied, poorly understood, seen as inferior to rational thought, What Swin is saying here is that if we look at past studies on second language acquisition, we will see that a lot of studies have been done on the cognitive side of learning, but quite a limited number of studies have been done on the emotional part of language learning. So that is what she means when she said that it is poorly studied, even though it is, we know that emotions play a huge role in one's language learning trajectory. Okay, next slide, please, is that? Okay, thank you. All right, so the second construct that I will talk about is positive psychology. So I'm going to cite the work by this one, Peterson, that is cited in McIntyre's book. In a very general sense, positive psychology refers to the scientific study of what goes right in life. As I said earlier, when someone learns a language, there are always positive, there are always negative experiences. But in positive psychology, we focus on what goes right in, or what the positive side, the positive experiences, the positive emotions of language learning. According to Fredrickson, in his broaden and build theory, he proposes that positive emotions work in 5 ways. Firstly, it can broaden an individual's attention and thinking that leads to exploration and new learning. What it means here is that when a learner feels good about his or her experience, positive feeling is there, so that positive feeling leads the learner to explore more and to learn more, to put in more effort to learn the language. Okay. Secondly, it helps to remove negative feelings that one might have towards a particular situation or action. Again, going back to my earlier explanation, when we have negative feelings, or a learner has negative feeling, this negative feeling will stay and it will linger. Okay, so what the function of positive feeling is that it can help to remove negative feeling. Okay. Thirdly, it promotes resilience. Fourth, it encourages building personal resources such as social bonds. And finally, it promotes future well-being. Okay, next slide. All right, the third important construct in my study is willingness to communicate. McIntyre, Donier, Clement, and Noel,
these are four very prominent scholars in the area of L2 willingness to communicate. So they define WTC as the probability of engaging in communication, that is speaking the target language, when free to choose to do so. What it means here is that I think it's very common for us as language teachers. Yeah, sometimes we feel that we have students who are proficient, but somehow they are very reluctant to speak in class. Yeah, whatever initiatives that we put in, whatever efforts that we put in, yeah, to make them speak, but they are just unwilling to communicate. Okay, so however, sometimes we see learners who are not very proficient to speak the language who are willing to communicate in the target language. So that is WTC. Yeah, it's one's willingness to communicate when given the choice either to communicate or not in the target language. Okay, next slide. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the study. Actually, it's a mixed method study. For the quantitative phase, yeah, among the research objectives is my colleagues and I, we wanted to find out the level of out-of-class WTC among a group of pre-service ESL teachers, because we noticed that as teacher educators, we feel that we are confronted by this issue every day, whereby we teach a group of proficient speakers of English, but they are not willing to take part in discussion. Yeah, when being asked questions, they are just quiet. Yeah, but in this study, we focus more on out of class WTC, their willingness to communicate outside the classroom, because we feel that in Malaysia, the opportunities to engage in verbal communication outside the classroom is aplenty, a lot. Yeah. So we wonder whether this group of students or participants are willing to take the opportunity to speak the target language. Yeah. Okay, that's the quantity phase, and then we have the quality phase, the qualitative phase, whereby that's the intervention, which I will talk more afterwards. Yeah. Okay, is that? Next slide, is that? Okay, so this is the can you go back to the sorry, the previous slide, please. Okay, sorry. So this is the intervention, yeah, the study. So from the quantitative phase, we found out that the level of WTC, out of class WTC among the ESL pre-service teachers is just moderate, yeah. So we expect the level to be high because these are proficient speakers of English. Yeah. However, when we see that the level is moderate, we feel that something has to be done. Okay. So that's where we went into the qualitative phase. Yeah. So the intervention. Okay. The intervention that we design is actually a virtual community whereby we form a private Facebook group. Yeah, the members consist of 18 pre-service ESL teachers. From the quantitative phase, there were about 118. Yeah, so we selected the ones with low WTC to join this virtual community. So those pre-service ESL teachers and 3 TESOL lecturers became members of this virtual community. The duration of this intervention, it took place for 8 weeks. And the students or the participants were required to, number one, they were required to post videos of them speaking in English, okay, outside the classroom. And then they took videos and then they post the videos on the Facebook group. They also need to view videos posted by others. They need to give comments and they need to react. Yeah. For example, just like to the videos posted by their friends. So at the very beginning of the intervention, yeah, the participants were advised not to give only constructive comments, yeah, not to give comments that could be deteriorating or embarrassing. Yeah. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just a screenshot of the virtual community. Yeah, it is a private Facebook group. It is called We Care. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I have here a sample of a video posted by the participants, but I don't think we can view it because it is a private group, so our technical team cannot play it for us. Yeah, it's okay. So next slide, please, is that? Okay, here are some sample comments. Okay, the video that I wanted to share with you was taken by one of the participants, whereby she went to our convocation festival. Yeah, so yearly we had our convocation, so we have festivals to celebrate the convocation. So she went there, and then she took a video of her talking English during when she visited the festival. Yeah, so here I'm sharing two comments given by the participants. Okay, wow, the expo must be really hot, because she commented in her video. She said that the weather at that time was very hot. I like that you are very confident recording video of you speaking English in public. Yeah. And then there's a second participant. Wow, looks like the festival is so happening, and I believe it's really hot there. It's so cool that you can do a video of you speaking in English confidently at a busy place. So these are the kind of comments or remarks given by the participants. Yeah, whenever one of them posted a video, constructive comments. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Okay, from the findings, okay, how did we analyze our findings, our data? Yeah, so we used Fredrickson categories of positive emotions. Yeah, so when we analyzed, we found that there were 4 types of emotions or positive emotions that emerged, yeah, from the data. So the first type is interest. Yeah. This type of positive emotion refers to the feeling to explore and learn more in order to improve oneself. It emerges when a learner is confronted with a challenging yet not overwhelming language learning situation. Oh, before that, I forgot. We after the 8th week, yeah, we interviewed the participants. So it's based on the interview data, okay, that we obtained this findings. So the first type is interest. Okay, next slide. It's not very clear. So here I have 2 extracts. Yeah, so I will just read to you the first one. Besides, we are making mistakes in that video. So here, the participant, she felt she's not that bad because others were making mistakes too. So I think, oh, okay, they are making mistakes, maybe worse than me. Yeah, so they are the friends are making mistakes worse than her mistakes. And then, but they proud talking English. So she realized that grammatical accuracy is not everything. Yeah, just like what Dr. Maiza has explained in her this one just now, yeah, during her session, whereby it's not accuracy that's very important. And somehow this participant has realized that. Yeah, I feel like, oh, they are just in the same boat with me. Yeah, we are all the same. So why I'm afraid talking? So at least it gives me some motivation. Because some people in this project, I didn't expect them to enter because I thought they are very good. Yeah, because there are some out of the 18 participants, some are actually very proficient, but the quantitative data shows that they are reluctant to, or their WTC is low. Yeah, so the participant, she has picked up that, yeah, on that fact that even though you you make mistakes, but it doesn't mean that you can speak the language. Yeah. Okay, next slide is that. The second type of positive emotion is hope. Yeah, this type of positive emotion refers to the urge to employ one's language skills and capabilities in order to improve his or her mastery of the target language. It arises when a learner feels worried about his or her current language proficiency, and thus he or she hopes to improve. Next slide. Okay, let's look at one of the extracts here. I mean, when I first entered, I thought maybe that the people who were in this group, those who weak in English, but then I realized that everybody has the problem. What's the problem that she realized? Lack of confidence. Not that we are weak in English. Look at that, yeah. She has realized, yeah, they are not weak in English, but they lack confidence. You just have to have a little help, and it's okay to feel that because we're only human. And when I see my friends speak in English, I think, okay, if they can improve, I can also improve. So now she has hope, yeah, that she also can improve her language performance, yeah, through the experience participating in this virtual community. Okay, is that next slide, please? Okay, the third type is pride. Pride, another type of positive emotions, refers to feeling good about own achievement. In the context of the present study, it is about feeling good about one's ability to speak eloquently. This positive feeling emerges when the learner receives compliments from the peers and lecturers. Yeah? Next slide. Okay. This participant, when I received a compliment from the lecturer about my video, I felt like, wow, if I speak, then people around me among the tussle, they will feel happy. Yeah, I think for me, happy. That's what I feel. So she's feeling very, very proud, yeah, with the fact that she was being complimented by one of the lecturers for her ability to speak good English, yeah, outside the classroom. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the last type of positive emotion that emerge from the data, that is inspiration. Yeah, this type of positive emotion emerges when a learner feels motivated to be as good as his or her peers who are proficient in the language. So let's look at the data. Next slide, please. Okay, this one, it helps because sometimes I feel jealous because they can talk better than me. So to be like them, I tend to speak a lot using English. So now, yeah, after participating in this virtual community, this participant felt that she's more motivated. Yeah, she's inspired by her friends by looking at the videos and her language. She's inspired. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, from that, the conclusion made is that based on Fredrickson's broaden and build theory, the most significant point is that the removal of negative feelings that one might have towards a particular situation or action. Yeah, this is the most significant finding, whereby in the context of the present study, it could be said that the participation in the virtual community has helped to a certain extent the participants to remove negative feelings. Yeah, we could see that, yeah, from the data, whereby initially they talk about being afraid, they talk about being not as good as their friends, yeah, but after participating and getting positive constructive comments, they felt good. So this positive feelings has helped to undo the lingering effect of negative feelings that they have helped in them. Yeah, this to a certain extent we could say help facilitate the participants' willingness to communicate. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Okay, now I will talk about a bit about the role of reflection, my reflection on the role of culture in the ways that the participants participated in the virtual community. Yeah, there are two influences. The first one is some of the participants reported feeling shy and were afraid to make mistakes. Yeah, so according to Lu and Su, yeah. These two scholars, they studied willingness to communicate among East Asian learners. Yeah? So they said that in order to maintain positive face or image, learners tend to remain silent rather than rather than taking the risk of saying wrong things and appearing foolish. Yeah. So this is about they are afraid to make mistakes. Yeah, which is quite an important role. Yeah, this is the culture, I could say, of East Asian learners. Yeah, most of them are very, very shy because they are afraid to make mistakes. Yeah. The second one is the presence of the lecturers in the virtual community. Some of the participants, when we interviewed them, they said that they would be more comfortable if there is no lecturer in the virtual community, whereby they said they would be more comfortable speaking, they would be more comfortable commenting, because they said that the language or what they wrote in the comments are not truly what they normally say to each other. So, but because of respect, so this is what a point highlighted by Cortese and Jean in 1996. People with authority such as elders and teachers should be respected. So this culture of respecting teachers, respecting the lecturers, somehow limits the students or the service ESL teachers' participation in the virtual community. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. These are some references, that I have used in my slides. I think that's about it. I've come to the end of my presentation. I hope that my presentation in some ways has benefited all of you. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to express my gratitude for a very meaningful presentation, Dr. Noraini. So I wonder, is there any question from our participants? Okay, if no, let's move to another presentation then. Our next presenter is Huda Birdiyeva Gulchikhra from Churchill Pedagogical Institute with theme Contextual Approach to Antonyms and Synonyms. Gulchikhra, are you ready? Gulchikhra, can you mute your microphone, please? Okay.
Okay. I hear me? Okay. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm giving a presentation about contextual approach of antonyms and synonyms, and especially the context clue, and when we're going to learn or acquire some knowledge about other language, which is a second language. And we also utilize this method and this strategy here. And for example, be familiar with what to unlock the meaning of unfamiliar words and the words around the unknown, unknown word, which gives you clues and make intelligent guess here. And the context clues, for a context clues are hints that and other views just how to define a difficult or unusual word, and this clue may appear within the same sentence as word to which it refers, or it may follow in a preceding sentence. And that's why I get sidetracked, be precise and concise here. Next slide, please. So, and here the four types of context clue, which have given more information about unknown words in the sentence. Here, such as common context clues, and the first, if I mention it, that. The definition context clue, it included the explanation and the illustration, like the examples and synonyms. And the next one, the contrast context clues, like the antonyms, the rest of the meaning of the unknown, unfamiliar word here. And the last, the examples context clue, and we make sense like the general meaning to relate to the logical thought. And here, and next slide, please. And synonym is a word with a meaning similar to another word, and we can utilize not only pay attention to the context clue, but also the connectors, the end conjunctionist. And so it's a beneficial way to have guessing the meaning of the word connectors or conjunctionists can help us understanding well here. And for example, when comes comparison in the sentence, and we can guess if we don't know one word and to highlight it word with another synonym and in the sentence. And these connectors are similar, for example, in comparison with, and also, or, and etc. We have a lot of connectors and conjunctioners here. And next slide, please. Okay. Okay. So next slide, please. The other slide. So, thank you. Thank you. And for example, look for the word in the sentence that could be synonym for the unknown word here. And for example, there was confusion or chaos among the fans when their team won the Super Bowl. Here, the or, I mentioned that or connector always gives the similar meaning here. And next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So, okay, like the context clue as an antonym, this word gives the opposite meaning, and we have connectors like contrast, it refers to opposite meaning, and in the in the main clause. And for example, next slide, please. For example, some children were willing to play in the snow, but this is a connector. Others were reluctant because it was so cold. And here, this connector gives the opposite meaning, reluctant and willing, it's answering with each other. And, okay, this information examples were shown or written by Julia Robitaille or Robert Cannelly, and the name of the article, the writer's researches from paragraph to essay in 2009. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And there are common types of clues, especially in a social study and science. The meaning of the vocabulary word is the sentence itself is often follow the unknown word here. For example, in order to become law, all certain colonies have to ratify or approve the constitution. That comes or this is a connector gives the synonym of this word, ratify and approve synonym with each other. It's a definition of that. Next slide, please. And okay. So next slide, please. This type of context clue use examples to help explain the meaning of the unknown word here. For example, next slide, please. For example, nutritious foods such as fruits and vegetables to help our bodies grow. And such as examples, give the examples to define this word, and this nutritious, give the definition, this word to this word. And next slide, please. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And this type of context clue use an explanation or description of a situation or experience to help us the meaning of unfamiliar words. Here, for example, I was a guest when I found my neighbor had robbed the jewelry store or stolen in the diamond. Given the situation, how would you feel? It's I was shocked. I was aghast. It's there are some explanation or description with this word, aghast, shocked. Next slide, please. Thank you. And sometimes the context clues aren't obvious, and we will need to use our background knowledge and the word being used to infer or draw a conclusion. We should capture our attention here, and how you interpret the word can affect your overall understanding of the text. So slow down and read carefully when you encounter unfamiliar word of the text, and just here giving a little guess with the picture. And we should take out the meaning of the sentence here. Next slide, please. Okay, are you ready for a little guess? So, beginning, first, use the following clues to guess it's a mystery person. Second, I was born on February 12th in 1809. Next, my first home was like 7 in Kentucky, and next, I was a lawyer in Illinois. I'm known for being honest. I give some information about him with very popular in America, being American statesman and lawyer who served as 16th President of the United States from 1861 to 1865. The last one, I was the President of the United States during the Civil War. Can you guess, please? Next slide, please. And this man, I emphasized that who is Abraham Lincoln. And this method to teach how to guess to locate the correct answer here. And we can name the context clue type. For example, the monkeys was a fruit chatter from me, which I had ear flags. So this gives explanation, and whatever it's like synonym with noise, that's why I had an ear flag. So the next example, unlike this, the connector always gives the opposite meaning. Unlike John's room, which was immaculate, and Jeffrey's room was very messy. Immaculate is tidy, messy, untidy. It's synonym with each other. And next example here, many companies are downsizing or reducing the number of employees we have. And in order to save money, this is a definition. We should take out the meaning here or connector gives the synonym of this word. And the next slide, please. For example, I remembered to bring all the provisions such as food or water or warm clothes of the house. Here, the provisions such as, for example, give an example of the word provisions. And next slide, please. The last one is that her quiet and timid ways made it hard for her to make friends. This is a synonym, and when comes comma between two words, these words are synonym with each other here. And this information and examples were shown by the Jumabayeva Jamila Charitusa, the name of the article, contextual antonyms and synonyms in 2015. Okay, my presentation is finished. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gulchehra, for a great presentation, dear. If any questions from our participants event? So let me give a turn to our next presenter, dear Dr. Franklin Pambi-Jose, with theme Tamil as a foreign language. Welcome, Dr. Franklin.
Thank you for introducing me.
Thank you.
I am Franklin Tambajos from Sultan Idris Education University in Malaysia. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me a chance to present a paper on Tamil as foreign language. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. One more. Introduction. Since I'm going to talk about Tamil as foreign language, I'll give a little bit introduction about foreign language. Just an introduction. A foreign language is a language which is not commonly spoken in a country of a particular speaker. Hudson has said that foreign language, which is a language which is not native to the speaker or to the country, can be termed as foreign language. Tenarasu has said that a language which is used in the speaker's own country can be used in a foreign country as foreign language. Next slide, please. The term Dravidia. Dravida is a term which was previously used to name the people who speak Tamil language in Tamil Nadu. The term they used is Dravida Makkal. Later, it changed as Dravidian language family, and the languages which are spoken under this language Dravidian family are called as Dravidian languages. And Tamil is one of the major Dravidian languages. Apart from Tamil as major Dravidian languages, 4 more languages are also there. That means which has both written and spoken forms. Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada and Tulu. These are the 4 other major Dravidian languages. Apart from this, Dravidian language family has more than 50 Dravidian languages, which is spoken not only in India, throughout the world, especially in Bangladesh, Pakistan and in Afghanistan. Brahmi is a Dravidian language which is spoken in Pakistan, Afghanistan and in Bangladesh, and in parts of certain parts in India also. Next slide, please. Tamil language. Like other languages, Tamil language also has both vowels and consonants. Then the shape of Tamil scripts are called as Vattal. Vattal means round shape. Shape will be round. And scholars tell that Tamil is rich in morphology. You can learn Tamil scripts very easily. You can learn you can frame Tamil sentences very easily, but it's not that much easy to have morphology. Why this? Because Tamil morphology has a set of rules called as morphophonic rules or Sandhi rules. So there are more than hundreds of rules. Because of these rules, scholars say that Tamil language is rich in morphology. We call in Tamil as Urbu or Urbaniyal. The Tolkappiyam is considered as the first Tamil grammar book and is also the ancient grammar book which belongs to 300 BC. That means the 3rd century BC. And the second Tamil grammar book is Nannul, which was written in the 12th century AD. And Tamil language is spoken in many parts of the world. Next slide, please. Objective. The objective of this study is to describe various aspects of Tamil language which can be considered as foreign language. Next slide, please. Methods used. Mixed mode method is used. Data were collected through questionnaire, interview and from the books which are related to Tamil language. In questionnaire, there are 15 questions are set according to objective in the questionnaire, and interviews were conducted in 10 different countries. That means 2 informants from 10 different countries. Next slide, please. Findings based on the interviews. Interviews were conducted through WhatsApp, voice messages, and through phone calls. The first two questions are related to publication of literary works in the selected countries. All the informants said that there are publications in their countries, in the selected countries. Second one is related to type of publication. What type of publication is found in your countries? So most of the informants said that publications are articles in daily newspapers. And in some countries, some informants said that even short stories, that means children's short stories, are also published in their countries. Then the newspapers mostly are published in their own countries, and in some countries, newspapers are imported from Sri Lanka and from Tamil Nadu, India. Next slide, please. Then the second one is related to Tamil schools. Many Tamil schools are found in the selected countries. Tamil schools are not full-fledged Tamil schools. In some countries, Tamil classes are being organized during the weekends and public holidays. In some countries, which are selected for this study, in some countries, only a subject, that means Tamil language subject, is taught in their schools. In some countries, they have framed their own syllabus to teach Tamil. And when I asked them why you have your own syllabus, they said that they have their own syllabus because the syllabus from Tamil Nadu or from Sri Lanka are not much relevant to their particular situation. Since the culture and other languages are different in their countries, the syllabus which are framed in Tamil Nadu or Sri Lanka are not possible to implement in their schools. So they have their own syllabus. The next was related to the support from the local governments. Most of them said that government supports by providing permission for conducting classes. Second, by providing classroom facilities like whiteboard and benches, desks, chairs, and so on. And second is, and the last one is providing necessary security for the students, for the teachers, and for the parents. And most of the schools are run by private Tamil organizations or private Tamil foundations. Next slide. Language festivals. They celebrate 3 language festivals. First one is related to Tamil Day, which is called as Tamilar Thiruvizha in Tamil. Mother Tongue Day, Thaimozhi Dinam. And third one is related to Pongal festival. They call that as Pongal Dinam. During these festivals, they conduct writing and Bharatanatyam, that means traditional dance competitions for the students. Then they conduct decorating and dance with stick for the teachers, students, and the parents. Decorating is shown in the picture. It's called as Kolam Podudal in Tamil, and dance with stick is called as Kol Attam. So they conduct this competitions during these 3 festivals, and they provide prizes or gifts to the winners. Next slide, please. Diglossic nature. Diglossic or diglossia is derived from Greek language, which means speaking 2 forms of the same language. In other words, you can tell that 2 distinct varieties of a single language. The Tamil language is diglossic in nature, which has 2 entirely different forms, which can be said as written form and spoken form. Written form is entirely different from spoken form. In Tamil, in some countries in Tamil, they call us Chan Tamil, that means pure Tamil, Odun Tamil, almost pure Tamil, and even Nadu Tamil, country Tamil also they use. So in all these selected countries, they use this diglossic nature of Tamil language. Next slide, please. Then coming to direct variations. Tamil has lot of direct variations since it's spoken in different parts of the world. So in the selected countries also, there are Tamil language has found that there are dialect variations. I given some examples here. Hungary, we have 3 different dialect variations. Then rice has 4 different variations, and sweet drink has 2 different variations. If you take rice, they call that a choru, sadam, and annam. In some countries they use even as annam. Payasam is a sweet drink which is prepared during the festivals and in some functions in the house. So there are also the 2 forms. One is payasam and is payasam. Next slide, please. Intervocalic sounds. In many languages, there are intervocalic sounds. But in Tamil, the peculiar of intervocalic sounds are there are no scripts in Tamil. That's a peculiar of Tamil language. But in pronunciation, you have to use the intervocalic sounds differently. Usually, the voiceless sounds changes into voiced when it occurs in between the vowels. This intervocalic sounds are found and used in all the selected countries. Next slide. Then the peculiar sound il is a retroflex sound. The front part of the tongue folds and touches the upper palate of the mouth. 70% of the informants said that il sound is not used in their Tamil in their countries. Only 30% of the informants said that il is used as such in their countries. So Ganesan has recommended that special exercises should be given to the people who are finding difficult to pronounce this retroflex sounds. Otherwise, the sound will be merged with other sounds. Next slide, please. Conclusion. Since many Tamils are immigrated to different parts of the world, many job opportunities are created by their governments, especially in the field of reporters and teachers. They have created many jobs. As I mentioned earlier, Tamil language has many characteristic features. Tamil language can be taught as special subjects. The most of the schools they are not teaching Tamil literature in their schools. They are teaching only Tamil language. So Tamil literature can be taught as a special subject in their schools. The Tamils are spread as they are immigrated to different countries. Tamils from Tamil Nadu, India, they have immigrated to many countries. They have spread in different countries due to the job opportunities and trade purpose. But from Sri Lanka, many people are in abroad. Sri Lankan Tamils are many spread in different parts of the world due to the civil war in Sri Lanka. So keeping all this in mind, definitely Tamil language can be considered as a foreign language. Thank you very much. Next slide.
I think it was also a very meaningful presentation, Dr. Franklin. Thank you very much. And no wonder everyone agrees. So any questions from our participants? So now let me give a turn to our next presenter, Shabnam Toluboboyeva from Churchill State Pedagogical Institute, with her theme teaching intercultural communication in English. Welcome, dear Shabnam.
good afternoon and good evening for all participants of conference. Can you hear me well? So I am so glad to participate in such conference with such doctors and professors as being boys and young teacher of institute. So today I am going to present my presentation in the communication foreign language, multicultural communication in foreign languages. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I want to begin my presentation with a quote by a great scientist for years that, in my point of view, is so suitable for today's theme. One should think of language and culture and not just of language and culture. Next, please. Today, we are learning in the age of technology that needs to be aware of everything as well as foreign languages. Now, people, especially youngsters, are needed to know multiple languages. In order to deal with the times in each sphere such as trade, tourism, international relations, technology, media, and science. When you learn a new language, it not only involves learning its alphabet, the word arrangement, and the rules of grammar, but also learning about the specific society's customs and behaviors. When learning or teaching a language, it's important that culture where the language belongs will be frank, because language is very much ingrained in the culture. Next, please. Specifics of nations. All nations have their own specifics different from each other. Traditions, culture, national picture of the world which reflect the specifics of the perception of the surrounding world. Creative culture, which can also be attributed to the elements of ethnography and ethnology. Next, please. Stereotype of image. As an example, American hero Robin Hood. In Uzbekistan, we have also our own hero as an example of Amatulu. Stereotype of situation. Superstitions are also different in all countries too. For example, falling leaves of summer, the symbol of wealth in some countries, when the same moon is lamp by form of sleep in some countries. Mental lacunas, kinetic lacunas, behavioral lacunas are different in all countries too. Next, please. And aspect of time. British people place considerable value on punctuality. If we agree to meet friends at 3 o'clock, we can bet that they will be there just after 3. Since Britons are so time conscious, the pace of life may seem very rapid. In Britain, people make great efforts to arrive on time. It's often considered impolite to arrive within a few minutes late. If you are unable to keep an appointment, it's expected that you call the person you are meeting. Some general tips follow. You should arrive at the exact time specified. For dinner, lunch, or appointments with professors, doctors, and other practitioners. Anytime during the hours specific for tea, reception, and cocktail parties. A few minutes early for public meetings, plays, concerts, movies, sporting events, classes, church services, and weddings. If you are invited to someone's house for dinner at 7:30, they will expect you to be there on the dot. An invitation might say at half past 7 for 8. In which case, you should arrive no later than 10 minutes to 8. However, if an invitation says sharp, you must arrive in plenty of time. And invitations. Drop in any time and come see with friends are events often used in social settings but seldom meant to be taken literally. It's wise to telephone before visiting someone at home. If you receive a written invitation to an event that says RSVP, you should respond to let the person who sent the invitation know whether or not you plan to attend. Never accept an invitation unless you really plan to go. You may refuse by saying, "Thank you for inviting me, but I will not be able to come." If after accepting you are unable to attend, be sure to tell those expecting you as far in advance as possible that you will not be there. Although it's not necessarily expected that you give a gift to your host, it's considered polite to do so, especially if you have been invited for a meal. Flowers, chocolate, or a small gift are all appropriate. A thank you note or telephone call after the visit is also considered polite and is an appropriate move to express your appreciation for the invitation. Dress. Everyday dress is appropriate for people's homes. You may want to dress more formally when attending a holiday dinner or cultural event, such as a concert or theater performance. Introduction and greeting. It's proper to shake hands with everyone to whom you are introduced, both men and women. An appropriate response to an introduction is "pleased to meet you." If you want to introduce yourself to someone, extend your hand for a handshake and say, "Hello, I am Hizbantan Sabnam." Hugging is only for friends. In Uzbekistan, it's normal to ask guests twice or kiss children, but in some other countries, it's considered to be a little bit rude. Dining. When you accept a dinner invitation, tell your host if you have any dietary restrictions. He or she will want to plan a meal that you can enjoy. The evening meal is the main meal of the day in most parts of Britain. But in Uzbekistan, in our country, it's a little bit different. Actually, and here are 6 hand gestures and what they mean in different countries and cultures. The first one is the win sign. This sign has 2 forms. The first one with the palm faced outward and other with the palm inward. In the US, United States, both ways refer to victory and peace. Protesters against the Vietnam War and activists adopted the gesture as a sign of peace. Because the happiest of the day often flash the sign, "Come out." While saying peace, it became popularly known as a peace sign. In other places, such as in the United Kingdom, Australia, and South Africa, the same gesture with the back of the hand facing the other person is considered to be an extremely insulting. The second picture is looking at your watch. This means I'm in a hurry or I've got to be somewhere. In the Middle East, however, a conversation should run its natural course, as it would be very rude to look at your watch mid-conversation. In Arabic culture, once communication has started, it must take its time. Next, please. In this picture, the horn finger. In the United States, the horn finger is adopted by rockers, and it's a sign of approval weapon. Spoken horns in the slogan and hand signal of the University of Jihad and Open. But in many Mediterranean and Latin countries, to make the sign at someone is to tell them that their spouse is cheating on them. Next one is the sign of come here. This is used in the United States to ask a person to step forward. But in Asia, this gesture isn't welcome. When you are in Asia, you should remember it. It should only be used to beckon up. If you do it in the Philippines, you could be arrested. Next, please. Thumbs up. This widely recognized sign of approval or arrangement is actually being used as a result in Bangladesh. In certain parts of the Middle East, it is definitely a highly offensive thumbs down. This sign has been confusing people for some of years because of being different and new. Next one is the sign OK. In most of the English-speaking world, as well as in several other countries, this hand gesture means that everything is fine, great, okay, or perfect. In Brazil, however, it's considered a rude gesture. The most famous example of this was in the 1950s when Richard Nixon visited Brazil and flashed the OK sign to a waiting road upon arriving in Rio de Janeiro, who responded with this. Next, please. I think that our traditions and customs are interesting for you, so here we can see some of them. In the first picture, you can see bright colors greeting that is done the next day of the wedding by new bride. In the second picture, one of the ancient traditions of Uzbek people, revolving bride and groom around the fire before the wedding. And I should mention that we have a lot of colorful traditions and customs as many other countries do, but because of limitation of time, I can show you only two of them. Next, please. Okay, not only traditions from each other, but also notions are different too. For example, motherland means close being members of the same religion and having two close traditions for Malaysian and Uzbek people. The notions of neighborhood, neighbor, relative, friend. And for English people, this notion means where exists well-paid jobs interesting environment for communication, and comfortable tone. Next, please. And now I'm going to share some useful techniques and activities that are considered to be productive in teaching intercultural communication. The following list of techniques and activities is compiled from various sources, and I consider that they are mostly meant to be used in class. The first one is creating an authentic environment. Displays, posters, maps, and really can create a visual and tangible presence of the other culture, especially in the situation where language and culture are so far away from the target country. Students can also make cultural vouchers too. Next, please. The second one is step 3. Colin stresses that it's not important whether students get the right answer or not, but by predicting, they will become more interested in finding it out. The right answers can be given by the teacher through reading, listening, or video, after which extra information can be provided. Quizzes are a high interest activity that keeps students involved. Next one is drama. Great scientists Barron and Fleming claim that when drama is taught properly, it's an ideal context for exploration of cultural behaviors, both one's own and other people. Dramatization makes cultural differences vivid and memorable as drama mirrors reality. Fleming suggests that for dramatization, such situations should be chosen where the tension derives from the different interpretations of the situation. Next, please. Next one is student research. Student research is considered one of the most powerful tools that can be used with more advanced student research. It combines their interests with the classroom activities. For a start, the teacher might ask learners to search in the internet or library and find information on any aspect of the target culture that interests them. This can lead to poster sessions or longer projects. Next, please. Teaching ICT and intercultural communication through grammar. Intercultural communication can be taught through grammar, though these two spheres seem not to be related to each other. For example, we may give exercises related to modal verbs in some sentences that describe different situations. With modal verbs, should, may, can, must, have to. In Britain, you should do something. In Uzbekistan, it's common to, you can do this activity, for example. Next, please. And I have a list that shows some possible sources of information which can be used as material for teaching culture. By using a combination of visual, audio, or textile materials, teachers are also likely to succeed in addressing the different learning styles of their students. It may not be new information for you, but I think that it will be productive to use them YouTube. Actually, here you can see them. Extracts from literary, internet, films and TV, encyclopedias, literature, background information, anecdotes, field work, DVDs and CDs, illustrations, videos, newspapers, magazines, interviews, photographs, plays, and songs. Lastly, that's all that I want to share with you. If it is productive for you, I am so happy. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to express my gratitude for Shabnam Tolibovova. Thank you, dear. If there's no any questions from our participants, so now we have 3 minutes break to stream the QR code. Dear attendee, please fill in the link or scan the QR code to your attendance and for a certificate. We will share it right now.
Itu tampil ya.
Now, I will call with much respect our next presenter, Honorable Dr. Mazlin Mohammed Mokhtar from Malaysia, with theme Introducing Literature at the Higher Institution to Enhance the L2 Learning Culture in Malaysia. Welcome, dear Dr. Mazlin Mohammed Mokhtar.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone. Okay, I'm Mazli Muhammad Mokhtar from the Sultan Idris Education University. Alright, so my topic for the presentation today is introducing literature, the small L, at the higher institution to enhance the second language learning culture in Malaysia. Okay, the introduction. Okay, Malaysia needs to develop knowledge workers who are able to innovate in the field of science and technology, and this requires access to knowledge and information in this field. Okay, what I'm referring to is the higher institution which focus on technical, science and engineering field here. Okay, so that is one of the aim, okay, by providing knowledge workers in science and technology. In regard with these higher institution with that kind of background, there are of course certain reference books that have been translated into the first language or Malay language. However, there are still quite a number of reference books in English. So translation is actually not able to keep up with the knowledge explosion in English. So in terms of the English lecturer, what can the English lecturer do to help the students improve their English language proficiency? Is there any alternative or approach to support these students in acquiring the language? So that is one of the scope that we're going to look at later on. Okay, referring to these students are actually learning English for specific purposes, or we call it ESP in short. Okay, the aim is to prepare them with the required technical skills. Most of the time, they are performing tasks related to their field of studies. So with that in mind, we know that the learn English is for them to be able to perform well in their field of studies. So how will the English teacher, or how are the English teacher will be able to help them in order for them to be proficient in their field of studies? Okay, one of the best reasons as why it is best to use, one of the reasons as why it is best to use literature in the lesson is to make them as a holistic individual, not only in the technical area, but also by having the knowledge about the world. So I'm trying to see the connection of using literature in these students with a background from technical and scientific field. So then, next one. Why is literature then? Okay, so there are a few points here why literature can help these students to understand or to learn English in a more fun way rather than just learning about the technical stuff. Okay, according to Huck, 1987, literature has the power to make us more human. Okay, a quote from him: to develop compassion and insight into the behavior of ourselves and others, to show us the past in a way that helps us understand the present, to move us in ways that facts, statistics, and history texts can never do or rarely do, to develop the imagination, to help us entertain ideas we could never have had, to interpret and translate our experience, to shape and to enlarge our imaginations, and to take us out of ourselves and return us to ourselves as a changed self. So in a way, there are a lot of things that we can actually learn from literature, apart from learning as part of as a poetry or as novel. Okay, because there are differences. In here, I'm focusing on the small L, okay, not the big L. So the capital L is mostly related to classical text, okay, but this one is more of referring to maybe popular fiction, fables, song lyrics even. Okay, they are part of the small literature. Alright, so the next point is when students read literature, they also learn the target language in a whole context rather than memorizing words and rules. I think not only in Malaysia, but in some of other country where English is taught as a second language or a foreign language, emphasis usually is on grammar rules and so on. Here, rather than teaching them grammar rules all the time, we can actually use these literary texts in order to incorporate the context, okay, with the rules. All right, so this way of getting knowledge about language resembles the subconscious process of learning of language acquisition. So at the same time, they are having fun reading literary texts. They are also learning the language. By incorporating literature in the teaching and learning of English language, it is hoped that the students' proficiency could be leveled up, and also their motivation in language learning could also be increased. Okay, Siva Palan 2008 stated that, that most research in relation to the teaching and learning of literature at Malaysian tertiary level has mostly looked into approaches or methods. They can be infused by educators to improve or enhance existing literature teaching methods, meaning we can use literature texts in order to enhance the teaching methods that we normally use in the class. And in his also previous research, he indicates that the importance of incorporating multicultural young adult literature to young adult learners to promote better understanding of cultures and cultural sensitivity. All right, for activities, what kind of activities can we use with poetry? We can have things like listening tasks, communicative activities, reading, writing, vocabulary, grammar, diction, and memorization activities based on the literary text that we choose. However, focus is always on language practice and enjoyment. And one must not underestimate the opportunity of using literary text. It provides actually unlimited language learning and exploration. The teacher's creativity is the only limitation. Okay, this is something which just now Associate Professor Dr. Maiza Teliza mentioned. There are many sources and materials outside, but teachers have to be creative and use them effectively. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, for the data gathering, since this is some sort of like a case study, so only 64 students were involved answering the questionnaire, and 4 lecturers were interviewed in one of the higher institution. Okay, this is because these students who were selected actually are not really having high proficiency in language, and some of them just barely pass their English exam. So we want to see how we can help them improve the English, although they come from a different background. Okay, so for the analysis, next slide. Okay, I will take a look at both views. One is the lecturer view, another one it will be the student view. Okay, from the lecturer point of view, there are 2 lecturers who say yes, that they can use literature text in teaching English in the technical field student. Okay, because lesson will be more meaningful and are also relevant to them in some way. It could also provoke students' curiosity if they are given time to read and discuss issue from the text as well. One of the lecturers is not happy. It's not sure whether to have literature or not. He or she said that it depends. Just do the need analysis first, and then we'll see how it goes. What about and see what the others are saying about this. And there's one lecturer who strictly say no to literature. They said no because the student have to read pages over pages of book then. They also need to look at the students' preferences and learning style first in order for us to introduce this literature text in this student background, in these students with engineering or technical background. It is noted that since it is technical
science and engineering students background. So most of the students will be male students. Okay, and she or he feel that male student prefers online experience, okay, rather than being cooped up in only reading literally text. Okay, that's what she or he think. Okay, now let's take a look at the student's point of view. Next slide. Okay, based on the student's point of view, 46 of them agree to have literature as part of English for specific purposes. Okay, whereas the majority actually a bit skeptical about it. Okay, one of the reasons is that they find that literary text to be uninteresting. Okay, they cannot see the importance of learning it for their future. Okay, this could be supported as most of the respondents were only able to list literary texts such as The Pearl, Robinson Crusoe, The Road Not Taken, okay, which actually they learned during school times last time. It could be seen also that the respondents are not actually reading outside the classroom. So they only read what they were asked to read in the class, that's it. Okay, but they don't enjoy other type of literary pieces. Okay. Apart from that, there are also positive feedback from the students. Okay, and some of them believe that in having literature in ESP, okay, is as one of the respondents stated, they are able to travel, okay, from one place to another just through literary text. Okay, this is mentioned by Dr. Dilnova just now, where she said that students also learn about other culture from the literary text even. Okay, and many of them actually prefer to learn English in a fun way, and some respondents hope that through literature the lesson could be more interesting. So there are some still believe that learning literature as part of ESP will be an interesting thing to do in the class rather than just learning the rules all the time. Okay, what will be the suggestions then? Next slide. Okay, the suggestions, we're going to take a look at the materials, teaching and learning, as well as lecturers. So emphasis should be made on communicative language activity using authentic and current materials. Okay, lecturers have to be aware of the needs of the student as it may enhance student motivation, thus inculcate interest in learning the language. So we have to be careful when choosing the materials. Okay, something which will be of interesting to the students as well. Okay, for the teaching and learning, lecturers will have more time with the students, and students will have more chance practicing the language. So it could be part of the syllabus by putting in the literature content, okay, in the syllabus even. All right, and lecturers for the lecturers part, especially those in engineering field, they have to be a bit open up with their mind to accept the new ideas. The students can learn not only grammar and vocabulary here, okay, but other things too if literature is incorporated in the lesson as well. Okay, why I give suggestion like this is that when this English teacher teach them in this higher institution, most of them are only focusing on report writing, on the grammatical rules, which is a little bit, sometimes it is a little bit dry. And students, actually when they learn, they go into English classroom, they would prefer to have something which is not so much related to their field, because 90% of their lesson are already in technical and engineering subjects. So they want to do something which is a little bit different. Okay, whenever a subject, for example, like a topic on process and procedures, it is expected then to have connected it with the field of study, but some prefer to do in different topics instead. Okay, because they want to have they want to have a little bit open, okay, with the other things that is happening in the world, okay, not only in their field of study. All right, so for the conclusion, Next slide. Okay, to help the students to gear them toward lifetime of literacy were through literature. They could not only learn English but also the world at large. Okay, this will eventually create a holistic individual that is capable to fulfill the vision that Malaysia has set forth, and at the same time, it can improve on the quality of education, especially in the English subject. And last one, although the idea of incorporating literature in the higher institution has received some unconstructive feedback, however, maybe a certain effort should be made in order to change their mindset and to give literature a little bit of room to fit in the second language education system. Okay, maybe the students had difficulties when learning it in school last time, but this time maybe the lecturers can help to use literary text in a more fun way of learning the grammar and so on. All right, so with that, I thank you.
Thank you, dear Dr. Mazli Mohammed Mokhtar. Accept our gratitude for a great presentation. If there is any questions from our participants. Okay, if no, I will give a turn with much respect to our next and last but not the least presenter, Honorable Kabilova Nafisa Raimovna from Churchill State Pedagogical Institute with theme Teaching English Culture along with the language. Welcome, dear Nafisa.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, dear guests, colleagues, and participants. We are so grateful for your participating and supporting us. The title of my today's presentation is Teaching English Culture along with the language. Please. Learning about culture is vital, as vital as learning the languages. When we interact with another language, it means that we need to understand the culture of the people who speak it. When we learn a new language, it doesn't specifically involve only the alphabet, the word arrangement, and rules of grammar. It also involves specific styles, customs, values, and beliefs. Culture affects language, giving rise to words, influence their usage in providing context. Language, in turn, supports culture, promoting social bonds and allowing for shared information. Please, next. Next, please. The aim of teaching English is to enable the learners to communicate using language orally and in writing. It doesn't mean that teaching English should not only cover teaching the language elements and the language skills, that is grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but it should also present the culture underlying the language. This is since communication culture plays an important role. One who can produce grammatical correct sentence may enable to convey his ideas successfully if he doesn't have sufficient knowledge of the culture of the language. Next, please. Next. English teachers must also pay attention to the cultural points of the English language to make the learners enabled to use language for communication both orally and writing. This is because nowadays there is a new emphasis on the inseparability of language and culture in the development of policies and programs for the teaching of foreign languages. For learners who speak the language being learned also leads to increased understanding and tolerance. The two main factors are affecting the successful cultural teaching in language classrooms are teachers and textbooks. Please. Next. Teachers should understand what to teach by culture and what methods to use. They should understand that their task is to make the students aware of cultural differences and help the students to become communicatively competent. The second factor is the language used in the textbooks. The language in the textbooks should contain elements of culture. There should be a kind of reminders for teachers that they should be aware that when teaching a language, culture must not be forgotten. Next, please. Communication or language is a process for channeling culture and cultural bonds that reflect reproduce culture. Different ideas are born from different cultures within the same culture. Culture is something influenced and impacted by the language, whereas the language is formed by the culture of a society. Similarly, language is not only an expression or a means of communication, but a component of a culture that makes it unique and specific. Some people understand culture as a behavior, such as using language, gestures, customs, eating habits, family life, and education, while others perceive cultures as products such as literature, music, dance, arts, and artifacts. And sometimes religions, beliefs, ideas, values, and institutions are also referred to as culture. The definition of culture above is that when talking about language, a culture will always be automatically discussed. Our values and speech shape our identity and personality. It not only does represent individual identity, but represents the identity According to Dobson, when someone successfully learns a language, you will also learn something about the culture of the speakers or that. That means when a teacher teaches a language, she should also give the complex system of cultural customs, values, and ways of thinking, feeling, and acting in that language. The difference between the two cultures is reflected perfectly in their languages. It is important to understand people who grew up with an entirely different set of values and beliefs, to understand the real relationship between language and culture. Next, please. The reasons teaching English along with its culture are among others. It can promote international understanding. Next, please. The reasons why English should be taught along with its culture are among others. It can promote international understanding, deepen understanding of one's own culture, facilitate students next to foreign countries, and the last one, motivate students. Next, please. The first reason why culture should be incorporated in language lesson is that one's action or utterances might be interpreted differently by people who come from a different culture. That's why knowing other cultures can help students understand other cultures. Thank you. There is some problems here. Okay. Secondly, learning culture also helps students appreciate their own culture. This might happen because when they learn about other cultures, they will see that similarities and differences that both cultures have, that this will lead to them to their being men with broad insight. Next, please. Learning culture will also make students get along with others more easily. Yeah, an area of traveling can be made easier because of the development of technology. Students can probably meet people from different cultures, both in their own culture or abroad. It's why equipping students with knowledge of culture of the language their learning will enable them to communicate with others more easily without being afraid of making unnecessary misbehaviors or actions. Next, please. The last reason why culture should be taught in a language classroom is that one of the most fascinating aspects of any language is its cultural flavor. It means that the teacher must not only acquaint the student with the strange sounds and structure of the target language, but he must also familiarize his students with the culture underlying and pervading the language he teaches. In this case, students will get motivated because they learn not only because they learn not only language but also have to use it in real communication. Please, next. Nowadays, English as a foreign language is regarded as an international language, and it makes the question of what constitutes the target culture complicated. It is widely understood that in Uzbekistan, English is a foreign language, and there are quite several countries that use English as their official and national language. Next, please. The question now is, what and which English According to Smith, an international language by definition is not linked to any particular culture since about international language. A, please. Non-native speakers don't need to internalize the cultural norms of native speakers of Next. That's why for the people of Uzbekistan, whose English is a foreign language, a variety of English cultures need to be introduced to synthesize the students to the practices of a variety of other cultures to develop their intercultural communication skills. This can be done by including activities in the curriculum that get students to reflect on their own culture and consider alternate views from other cultures. For conclusion, it was discussed. According to Dennett, teachers of English must take into account the cultural aspects of English when teaching. This can be done firstly by carefully examining the textbooks they are using, since in any language teaching learning situation, Success depends on giving proper consideration to both human elements, such as the role of teacher and the nature of the students, and also to non-human elements such as the textbooks, the syllabus, the facilitators, and etc. Another thing that teachers of English should pay attention to is that the teaching cultural aspects that don't necessarily need special sign allotment, as cultural points can be easily integrated to the teaching of any language skills and or language elements. Next, please. What the teacher needs to do is to choose the most appropriate context in which a certain cultural pattern should be presented. Another thing that should be taken into account when the teacher decides to introduce culture in the EFL classroom is that he should try to make the students read graded literary texts as extensive reading activities, since it offers some advantages for the students. Others to acquire not only both language elements and skills, but also introduce them to the context when and where the language is used. Next, please. One naive assumption occasionally made by teachers is that a mastery of the linguistic patterns of a foreign culture leads in itself to thinking like a native, and knowing the culture for effective communication will automatically speak of the culture of the target language. Teachers, however, should not worry about it, because learning a language in isolation of its cultural roots in EFL, for example, will not make the students be willing to introduce English culture when teaching the language, so that the students get the idea where, when, and how the linguistic patterns that they learn in classrooms are used in communication. It was the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Accept our gratitude for a great presentation, dear Nafisa Rahimovna. So these are our presentators for today. Puan-puan dan tuan-tuan, ladies and gentlemen, hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar. Many thanks for all of you dears. You all made a great presentation. We all loved them and we hope it will be very helpful in our future work. Dear attendee, please do not forget to fill in the link or scan the QR code to your attendance and for a certificate. Now I will give a turn for Dr. Azim Yuldashov for closing today's joint international practical video conference between Turkic State Pedagogical Institute and University Pendidik and Sultan Idris. Sincerely, yours, Saida Gazieva.
Thank you, Saida. Thank you very much, Saida. Let me again, and at this closing instance, thank you all for having joined this conference. Your active and dynamic participation has made this conference a successful event. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. Special thanks to Mr. Tarmizi and the City Shohaida for close collaboration. We call all of you for further collaboration and look forward to hear from you. Wish you all the best. The 2020 Joint International Scientific and Practical Conference between CSPI Uzbekistan and the UPSI Malaysia has been declared closed. Thank you again for joining this conference. Sure.